There we are. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. This is our monthly office hours live virtual Q&A. And this month, we're actually going to be chatting about resumes and cover letters, specifically from the perspective of neurodivergent professionals. Now, we all probably know, everybody in this call probably knows just how tough job hunting is and just how more complex it gets when you are one of those people who thinks differently from the people who you are trying to get hired by. And resumes and cover letters are a particularly tricky thing because, it is a very, very specific skill set that we are all, for some reason, expected all to have in order to be able to sell ourselves. And, unfortunately, that's just the way it kind of works. So if you could kind of think of this presentation as kind of like a crash course and some survival tips as to how to try and make your job application documents work for you in this complicated world of work that we've kind of found ourselves in. Yeah, so why don't we get started? The first thing I want to do is introduce myself. So, there's my face there. So, Veronica Yao, that's me. I am the career coach behind Atypical Careers, and I specifically specialize in working with neurodivergent professionals. I myself has ADHD. I've been in the world of neurodivergence ever since I was young. I had family members who were also neurodivergent, and then of course I got diagnosed late in my career when I was about 30. And that really kind of put it into context at that point in my life, because it was so funny. At that point in my life, I realized that I had been writing a lot about career advice and best practices all throughout, my marketing career, which I had been doing at that point. And then it kind of like made sense to me that, oh, that's why none of the advice I wrote about worked for me, because it didn't take into account how my brain works and, the unique challenges that I have. So those are really, really, so those are some of the things that I try to address through Atypical Careers and these kinds of sessions, these office hour sessions here. And for anybody who's just rolling in, I just want to say hello and thank you so much for joining us. Just so you know, we are recording this session just for other people. So if you want to make sure that your camera is off and you're on mute, that would be best, just to make sure that you're not, captured in the recording too much there. Otherwise, feel free to chat away in the chat there. But let's see. I had a couple of slides here because I wanted to talk about first some of the myths that we kind of believe as job seekers, or at least the myths that are kind of fed to us as job seekers. And the biggest one that I kind of come across as a career coach is the fact that a good application will land you a job. And I wonder how many of you guys actually think, actually have this impression, or at least, subconsciously feel that this is true. If you create the perfect resume, the perfect cover letter, you say all the right things and check off all of their boxes, you will be a shoo-in to get the job. But I actually want to challenge that thought and actually bring up an alternative point of view. The point of view being that applications don't get you jobs, they get you interviews. And some people might think, well, Veron, what's the difference? And we're like, well, the difference is that job applications are only there to help you move to the next step of the process. Its job is not to get you the actual job. That is the point of the interview, of the follow-ups, and all of those kinds of things. So we really want to try and make this a lot more bite-sized and realize that applications don't get you jobs, they get you interviews. And another way of saying this is that applications, the only job of the application is to get the person on the other end, whether it is the recruiter, whether it is the hiring manager, to be interested enough in you to be like, I should reach out to this person and learn more about them. That's all your application has to do. Now, whether or not this complicates things more in your brain, or it actually gives you a sigh of relief and being like, oh my gosh, I don't have to put so much pressure on myself just to make the perfect resume and everything like that. Everybody's going to have different reactions to it, but this is one of the things that I really want to make clear is that, all you want to do with your application documents is make sure that there is enough information that they will be interested enough to call you back. So with that established, I want to kind of list out some of the things that make a good resume. Now, some of these are going to seem very familiar. Some of them might even seem like, Veronica, I already know this kind of stuff, but I figure it's kind of helpful to kind of outline it here just so that we can see it all in one place. So some of the building blocks of a good resume is, one, a clear sense of identity. So what does this mean? It means that this resume should reflect that you know who you are and you know what your strengths are and why you would be well fit for this role. And it's kind of hard to kind of do that especially if it's your first time, because you're just like, well, isn't all I'm doing is listing off all my experiences. And that is still a resume. It's a perfectly good resume, but the goal is, and I'm kind of drawing from my marketing and branding background now, and I'm kind of melding it into this. What you really want to do is catch their attention and make them realize, oh, this person knows what they're talking about, and oh, this person clearly understands like what they're trying to get themselves into and how to promote themselves in a way that I can really envision what this person might be like, and it might get me really excited about who it is. I know that's a lot to kind of put under a clear sense of identity, but those are kind of the things that it leads to. Now, the second bullet here, skimmable, easy to read. How many times have we as neurodivergent people looked at a giant block of text, whether it is like for a college assignment and we're looking at like, the textbook, or we're looking at like, this huge post on Reddit without a TLDR or something like that. And you're just like, I don't want to read that. No way. Like my brain doesn't have the capacity to skim all that stuff. Well, if you think about a recruiter, whether or not, wherever they might land on the neurodivergent, neurotypical scale, they're probably also very overloaded with information. They are reading many, many resumes per day. Now, obviously, that is not necessarily your problem per se, but it does stack the odds a little bit more in your favor if you can make their job a little bit easier. And so what do I mean by that? I mean by anticipating some of the challenges that the recruiter might have and trying to make a better experience for that person so that when they are reading your resume, it was actually kind of a joy to read. It's not overwhelming. It's clear. The point is clear, and the goal is clear as well. So that is one of the reasons behind why we want it to be skimmable and easy to read. That's why we use formatting and we use like very clear, designs and layouts and things like that, so that it is a joy to read and it's not a headache and you're like, oh my God, I need to do this, right? That already puts the recruiter or the hiring manager's brain in the right mode and start thinking of you positively, as opposed to like, oh my gosh, more work, right? Now, obviously, this is all stuff that we don't have full control over, but these are things that we can kind of tweak along the way in order to try and influence the impression that this person is getting. Again, this is a first impression that is coming off of basically a piece of paper, and it is challenging because we don't have the chance to kind of like address the questions that they might have. So we want to make sure that what is included on the resume is very leaves a really positive impression. Now, I went a little bit off topic there. Surprised I have ADHD. Sorry, guys. But let's go on to the next bullet, which is an intuitive layout. So when we are doing these, thank you, Sarah, no apologizing. We're all very proudly neurodivergent here. We intuitive layout. So we want to make sure that the most important information is easy to locate. So most resumes you will find have the most important information, like the name and the contact information at the very, very top or at the very, very bottom. But most of the time I see it at the top in the header, probably in the top right section or centered in the middle. It doesn't really matter. But as long as it is very easy for the person who's reading it to be like, oh, I need to contact this person. Where's this information? It shouldn't be buried in a bunch of text, and it should be very easy to find. This can be done through formatting, through colors, through the way that you lay it out, but you want to make sure it's very clean and easy to read, which ties back to the skimmable point as well. The last thing on this list that I've put here is contains keywords aligned to the job posting. Now, this is probably where a lot of you guys are being like, oh my gosh, I have to like, you know, customize my resume here and everything like that. And that is part of the story. So yes, you do absolutely have to go through your resume and make sure that it is aligned with the kind of job that you are applying for. If you are mirroring, you know how neurodivergent people tend to mirror sometimes in social conversations. So let's say I'm in a kind of an uncomfortable situation and I'm talking to somebody who is new, and they're having some sort of like body language and certain kind of language, and I'm trying to mirror it a little bit, you know, so that I kind of feel like I'm vibing on the same wavelength as them. This is similar to what we're trying to do with resumes and keywords, except robots are involved, AI is involved, and all that kind of stuff. But basically, if they see that you are using similar language to them, that's going to trigger something in their brain to say, oh, this person is on the same wavelength as me. So that is part of the reason why we make sure that we align keywords, and we make sure if they're saying social media management, you're saying social media management. If they're saying customer service representative, maybe you can use the word customer service representative as well, so that they can see, and of course the robots and the ATS can see, that you are aligned in that sense, and it indicates to them that you'll have a better chance of being a good candidate for the role. So that is a little introduction there. And I do have some examples of resumes, and I hope that you can see these. You know, try and expand your screen as much as you can. Obviously, my client's name was not Adam West. He is not Batman, but you know, but I decided to use this example and change all of the information on there. You know, so this is one of the clients that I had previously, and this is kind of a unique style of resume that I developed. This is all designed on Google Docs, and what I did, and the most important parts of this is I'm going to go through it with you right now. So at the very top we have the header. So we have very clearly laid out what the name of the person is, and your name is basically what your brand is. It's like, you know McDonald's, the rest of the fast food restaurant chain, or like Target, the retail chain. You are so and so. Your name is the name of your brand and how people identify you. So some people wonder, should I put my middle name in there? Whatever. You just want to make sure that however your name is showing up on there, that's how people are going to know and recognize you. So put your preferred name on there if you have a preferred name or something like that. And then, if you need to figure that out later, then with them when it comes to onboarding, you can let them know what your documented name, government name is, or any of that kind of stuff there. So that's number one. Number two, we have a subtext underneath the name. So in here, I've put arts and administration professional. Now, why did I put that there? Because I want the person who is reading this to instantly identify my brand name, my name as a professional, Adam West, as tied to this title, which is arts and administration professional. I want them to think of those two as tied together, one and the same. So I put them right next to each other, and it's the first thing that they're going to read on there. This subtext is going to basically set the tone and show them, hey, this person is really well aligned for this job. They're using similar language, like hopefully the job that they're applying for is similar to arts and administration professional. If you're applying for a job that might have a different title than arts and administration professional, maybe you're applying for a receptionist job, which is tangentially related. You could put down, experienced receptionist, for example. I almost said perfectionist, which is wrong. Experienced receptionist. And then that's a very, very quick and easy way to tailor your resume and mirror those kinds of keywords and those kind of language there. This is something similar that happens on LinkedIn. I actually took this idea off of LinkedIn because, as you know, on LinkedIn, we have a space underneath our name where we can put down like a summary of like what our title is right now and all that kind of stuff. So this is a very similar situation. Now, of course, you'll see that the contact information is in the top right corner. That is where they'll expect it to be. So we don't want to subvert their expectations there. We want to make sure it's very easy to skip. Now, maybe the most unique part of this resume here is the highlights of skills, which is in that gray box at the very top of the resume. Now, there are 4 qualifications there that me and my client had decided were their biggest qualifications, the things that make them the best at the kind of job that they are trying to apply for. So we outlined all 4 of these at the very top very, very clearly, so that they can kind of sorry, I'm gathering my thoughts. If the people who read this resume, whether or not they're a recruiter or whether they're the hiring manager, if they remember nothing else about your resume except for your name, your tagline underneath your name, and the 4 highlights of qualifications, that should be enough to make you stand out in their brain. And remember, hey, this person, summarize, they have these 4 strengths. They have the title that is related to our title and everything. We want to set the tone that way. Everything else after that is pretty much a standard resume. As you can see, there are bullets there that explain what you did in your work history, and you can select what is the most relevant to include in your application. But that is basically the way that I approach resumes, and I hope that kind of formatting might be helpful as well. I do see some questions in the chat, and I'm going to try and address them as we go. Hi, I do see that you submitted some questions. I'm going to try and get to those later on in the Q&A. For Allison, you love the way the skills are laid out, but do you happen to know if this resume is ATS friendly? This particular resume is not ATS friendly, and the reason for that is because I use tables and to kind of lay it out. So that particular resume was designed to be viewed by a human. That being said, you can make a version of this resume that is more ATS friendly. And what I typically suggest to people is that we have 2 versions of our resume. One is the version that is meant to be seen by people, that is very easy to read and very skimmable and a joy to read, and it has that experience. The other one is an ATS, which is going to look really ugly because it's going to be basically the most basic formatted on Microsoft Word or Google Docs that you're going to have, and it's only meant to impress the filter and the ATS. So you might want to have more than one version. It shouldn't take too long to put together an ATS version because it's basically a stripped down version of your main copy there. So I hope that answers things there. What I have on the screen here is another cover letter that I have developed for another client. Again, all the information is changed here. And the main thing that I want to point out about this is, one, I very rarely encourage people to go beyond one page for their cover letter. And, by extension with resumes, 1 or 2 pages is ideal, at least in North America, where I kind of specialize in. You might want to check your country or your location to see what the most regular aspects are. But I'm going to try and talk about it from the aspect of how to catch people's attention and how to keep them engaged through an application here. Now you can see here one of the biggest things I work on with my clients is managing energy levels, because as we know, tailoring applications is exhausting, and we don't necessarily have a ton of extra ton of extra energy to kind of expend. So we want to be very, very strategic about how we use our time and energy. So this is one of the templates that I would make for my clients, where, you know, as long as we've decided specifically what kind of job that they're applying for in advance, and they're being very targeted about the types of jobs that they're applying for, we can have, in theory, one cover letter with just a few spaces there where you can kind of fill things in, like job position title or employer name or things like that, and maybe even like tailor only like a couple of sentences or one paragraph as opposed to rewriting the whole thing. That is a much more effective way to use your energy as opposed to writing something from scratch every single time. You'll lose track of what you said and all of that kind of stuff. So this is kind of an example that I would recommend. So feel free to take a screenshot, if you want to. Again, it will be a recording of this sent out to you afterwards as well, so you'll be able to just kind of pause the screen and take a look at it. But if this is something that you are interested in, feel free to take a screenshot right now and reference this later. Otherwise, I'm going to move on, but that is just something that I wanted to show there. Let's see here. And apologies, I'm just going to let's see here. And for anybody who's just joined here today, if I could just ask you to keep your camera off and your microphone on mute, that would be fantastic, just because we're recording this and I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable if your face shows up in the recording that I end up sending to everybody. So just a heads up on that. This is another thing that I want to share, and I recognize that we're already quite a bit into this presentation. I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A. So I'm going to very quickly go over this. This is one of my favorite resumes that I've written. It is a skills-based resume, and the story is that the person I wrote this resume for was a stay-at-home mom for many years, did a lot of volunteer work and a lot of personal projects, but not a lot of paid work in the line of work that she wanted to go in, which was communications. So if you can see on the second page here under highlights of skills, you'll see that instead of listing her experience chronologically, we've actually listed her experience by skill set. So we decided these are the 5 areas of skills that people would be most interested in hearing about from her, and we organized her experience based off of that. So again, feel free to take a screenshot of this if you would like to, so that you can revisit it later. But this is a skills-based resume is a really, really great way to outline your experience without having to do the chronological way. And a lot of people will benefit from this if they, A, do not have a lot of experience, or B, they might have gaps in their experience, or they're trying to transition from one industry to another industry or another line of work, and they want to kind of hide the gaps in their resume a little bit. So this is a really good way of hiding those gaps by showing it based off of skill as opposed to based off of, chronological timeline. Okay. Great. I'm going to flip over to the next one. It is Q&A time, and I want to make sure that we have enough time for this because we've got a lot of questions to get through. Once again, I'm going to try my best to get to the questions in the chat as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and I'm going to do my best to kind of manage all of this at once. But we do also have some pre-submitted questions, so I'm going to go through those as well. All right, let's get started, friends. The first question I have here: how long should I make my resume? I don't have a lot of experience. I just graduated last year, and my career center counselor says I need to make it 1 page. But my friends say I should include as much information as I can on 2 pages. So this is a very common question, and I'm going to put it in the chat as well for accessibility purposes, so you can see here. Now, in terms of how long to make a resume, people always tell you it needs to either be 1 page or 2 pages. They never tell us why. And that is the most frustrating thing, is when people tell us a rule, but they refuse to tell us the logic behind the rule. So I am going to give you some logic behind the rule so that you can make your own informed decision. The reason why people say that you should keep your resume to no more than 1 or 2 pages is because that is usually the limit of how much information a person can absorb in one sitting. Okay, if you go past 2 resumes, it starts to be more like an investment. You need to invest time, you need to invest energy and stuff like that to process all the information. The shorter your resume is and the more concise your resume is, the more likely it is that they'll be able to retain that information and process it easier. So that being said, it's not always about including absolutely everything they need to know about your resume. Rather, I encourage you to think about what are the most impactful things you can say about your qualifications in a resume, and then from there, if they have additional questions like, oh, I wonder, like, what happened between this time and this time. They don't specify, like, this gap in their resume, or maybe, oh, they have like 5 out of 6 of the qualifications that we were looking for. I wonder about that 6th one. At that point, hopefully the information that you've presented is so strong and checks off the majority of their boxes that instead of being like, oh, like they don't have all 6 of these things that we need, we're not gonna talk to them. Instead, they're gonna be like, oh, they have 5 of things that they need, and they outlined it so clearly that it would be worth my time to reach out to them and just find out about the 6th one. And at that point, you see, this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, that job applications are meant to get you interviews and not the job itself. The only thing it needs to do is get them to want to reach out to you, because as soon as they reach out to you and you are able to be in an interview situation, or you're able to talk to them on email or something like that, you have a lot more power in that situation than you do when they're just reading a piece of paper. So that is the goal, so that you can do that. Let's see here. I'm seeing some new questions in the chat, and I'm just bringing them down. Leah, I'll answer your question real quick. It's a website called nounproject.com, and sorry, the hyperlink didn't show up, but nounproject.com has free icons that you can use. I mean, the free ones are always black colored, so I only use the black ones because that's the free ones, but they have a huge library of free icons that you can use on there, okay? So that is my answer. So in terms of the fact that this person has just graduated last year, I would say you probably don't have a lot of experience, as you said, but you do want to put in your most relevant experience there. If you feel like your relevant experience is not enough to be impressive, then you might want to start adding your tangentially related experience, whether you have customer service experience or whatnot that you have there. So hopefully that will help you be able to make an informed decision. But again, there is no rule against one or the other. So just know what the logic behind the 1 or 2 pages is. Great. We're going to move on to the next question here. I'm wanting to have a tech career as a Salesforce admin. I have some Salesforce certifications already, associate and a college BA in nonprofit management. How can I get a Salesforce fully remote job without a tech background and little work history at all? That is a challenging one for sure, and I'll do my best to answer it. So if we're talking specifically about resumes, the best thing that you can do is look over your experience right now and figure out what are the things that are aligned with the kind of job that you're applying for. Now, I haven't been like on the job boards like super recently, and not specifically for Salesforce admin type of jobs. So I'm wondering, first off, like, are there a lot of these kinds of jobs available? Are there a lot of remote jobs available? I'm guessing not, because the trend that I've been hearing lately is that, remote jobs are slowly going away as people are being pushed back into the office. At least in North America, that seems to be the trend here. So it's going to become more and more challenging to find a fully remote job. That being said, it is not impossible. So what can we do here? So definitely your background in nonprofit management is great, but it is not, but if you're looking for more of a corporate type of job, that might not be directly related, but I still think it's valuable to show what your BA is. So I would include that in your resume. Your Salesforce certifications definitely include that. I would encourage you to consider making a skills-based resume as well. So ask yourself, what are maybe, let's say, the 5 5 top qualifications or skills that you have that would make you great at the Salesforce admin job. Look up some of the job postings that you intend to apply for and see what are the most common words that pop up. If you're a fan of ChatGPT, you could feed the job postings through there and see what are the most common terms that come up commonly throughout these postings, so that you can try and tailor your resume to that there. Otherwise, it is also a combination of, networking and trying to be in the right place at the right time when an opportunity comes up. It is hard to break into a new line of work, but I have faith in you and I hope that you can do it. All right, let's move on to the next question here. This question is, how do I properly format my resume to make sure that it passes the ATS filter? And isn't it really frustrating that we have to appease the robots in order to even get considered for a job? But it's not my point to sit here. I could question the system all day, but let's talk about the ATS filter. The ATS filter is basically a system that will basically scan your resume and to try and make sure if you match the qualifications that they're looking for. Now, there's not really a way to know for sure what they're looking for, but you can pick up on clues through their job posting. Again, making sure that your keywords are matching as much as possible, just like I said previously. It might be helpful to have more than one resume, as I mentioned earlier in this chat. One that is set up for human eyes, so a little bit more designed, and things like that. And you can have a more stripped down formatted version on a Word doc or something like that you can use to upload to the ATS filter, to the ATS, so that it will be able to pick up on the document keywords a little bit better. Now, the main things to make sure that the ATS can pick it up, like you can Google and find general rules, but generally what it means is that you don't want to have it overly formatted. So like bullets are typically okay, but you don't want to use like tables or columns or anything like that to try and make it look overly fancy, or else the system is going to have trouble reading things chronologically and pulling out the information. Now, sometimes the ATS will ask you to manually input your information anyway, which is the most annoying thing in the world, but we have to do it. So that might be helpful, as well as just making sure that all of that information that is being processed into the system is correct. So it's not a perfect system, I'm sorry, but hopefully that will help. Let's see here. I am going to try and take on, I'm going to take on the next question here. Let's see. Apologies, because I'm doing this by myself today and I'm just coordinating a whole bunch of stuff over here. But I have ADHD. I was made for this. So the next question here I have is, I am applying for marketing jobs, and some people I have recommended I redo my resume in Canva instead of Google Docs. Should I switch over? Again, this is going to come down to, sorry, I'm just going to copy it into the chat. This is really going to come down to, do you want your resume to be ATS friendly or not? Canva resume is great for creative type of jobs. I was in marketing before. So that means that, I also used a Canva resume for a while. I also designed my resume to a certain degree, even on Google Docs and stuff, because I found that in the creative space and in spaces where that is valued, you need that in order to be competitive. That being said, it is not ATS friendly, so you might want to have a second version of it in a Word document that you'll be able to feed into the hiring system as well. So that would be my recommendation. I do think marketing is a great place to use a designed resume, but for other industries that aren't as creative, I would say it's not absolutely necessary. Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to answer one more pre-submitted question. Then I'm going to go through some of these live questions as well here, because I am taking note as we go here. So let's see here. How can I organize disconnected work history with notable gaps of employment? For example, organization on paper, communication about it, and phrasing. So this is very common because especially neurodivergent folks, we are so much more likely to burn out in the workplace. And because of that, and between that and like, other life demands and, the complexities of just, existing in this world, like, it is very common for us to have gaps in employment. And we are constantly told you can't have gaps in employment or else nobody's going to want to hire you, which strikes fear into our hearts. And we're just like, oh my God, I'm never going to get hired. Now, yes, there are going to be employers out there that are, going to be sticklers about this, but there are also a lot of employers that, as long as you have a reasonable explanation or something, then they'll be able to be very understanding about it. So you want to find that balance between, how honest do you want to be, and like how honest is not the word that I'm looking for here. How transparent do you want to be about your situation? What is their business? Like, how much do they absolutely need to know, right? So those are some things about, communicating about it. I don't know about this particular situation, but I'll use a general example. If you were on burnout for the last, 6 months or so, and you have not been employed during that time, and now you are looking for a job, maybe you've been let go by your employer during that time, which unfortunately does happen. You will want to decide how you want to phrase it. Now, you could just say something like, unfortunately, I had to take a leave for medical reasons. That's literally all you need to tell them. You don't even need to put that in your resume. You only need to tell them that if they ask you in person or if they ask you like directly. As for the resume and the cover letter, I wouldn't draw unnecessary attention to the fact that you have a gap. One of the ways that you can, if you're really, really worried about that glaring gap, there are 2 things I would recommend you would do. One is for your employment history, instead of saying this is my employment history or whatever you put on as the header there, put highlights of experiences. And what that header does is it kind of sets the tone and says, this is not everything in my resume, but I have curated it so that all the relevant stuff is here. And you can even put a sentence somewhere in there if it looks good and just say, like, for my full work history, please ask me. Or maybe you can link it to your LinkedIn if you have your LinkedIn done or something like that. Option number 2 is something that I mentioned before, which is the skills-based resume, which is really, really good at masking that chronological aspect of it, because it is focused more on what skills you have to offer that you have already exercised in other roles as well. So I do recommend that as well. All right, I am going to move to a live question here. So I am going to read this, and forgive me. Well, actually, no, I hope this is helpful for you, but I tend to read things out loud to process it, especially if it's a live question in the moment. So I am just going to set this up here. And I know this person had 2 questions. Okay, so the first question here that I am posting here: should I signpost my ADHD? Sorry, I said ADHD because I keep thinking it's me. Should I signpost my ASD so they know who you're hiring? So I guess the question here is, should I disclose? And if so, when? Which is a very, very common question here. First off, I would not ever recommend disclosing your neurodivergence or any of your medical, information on your resume. They don't need to know that kind of stuff, because that should not, in theory, affect your qualification, how qualified you are to do the job. Majority of the people that I work with will probably not disclose at all during the hiring process, because technically it's not necessary for them to make that decision on there. And then most of the people that I work with, and obviously this is not everybody, but most of the people that I work with will probably decide to disclose once they've been hired or afterwards. Now, the exception to this is if you feel like you're going to be needing accommodations during the hiring process. So for example, I know we're going into interviews now. This is not quite resumes, but let's say you're going into an interview and you feel like you're going to need some accommodations. One of the most common accommodations is asking for the questions in advance, for example. Then you don't necessarily have to disclose that you have ASD, but rather you could say, if I could request an accommodation, would you mind providing these things for me? It would be very helpful. And you don't have to expand beyond that. Now, if they get pushy about it, that might be a sign about what it might be like to work there, and you can make an informed decision about whether or not that's something you want to sign up for. But hopefully that information is helpful there. Let's move on to the next question here. Just processing, let's see. Okay, the next question I have here. Yes, Leah, you can ask for interview questions. Now, it's not super common, like it's not going to be like super common, but it is something that, I have seen employers accommodate for. It is because sometimes they do have the questions in advance. It's going to depend on the employer. There's always an element of risk that comes with requesting accommodations, unfortunately, in this world. But, if you are willing to advocate for yourself and willing to put yourself out there, you can make that decision for sure. Okay, the next question I have here that was submitted live is, should I add more jobs with just description or responsibility, or less with more descriptions? Which jobs would I pick? I have my resume and can share if needed. Okay, thank you so much for that. I'm going to go back to one of the examples that I gave earlier in this document. Let me see if I can find here. So, for example, I'm going to show you this resume here, and I wonder if I can zoom in. Can I do that? No, this is not the time to try and figure this out, unfortunately. But hopefully you can kind of see right over here, if you can see where I'm circling. I have, in this particular layout, I have put the title at the top, so what their experience is, as well as their employer. And then from there, what I do is I actually highlight the skills or the category that we're talking about. So for example here, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so for example, the first thing under freelance writer and social advocate is copywriter and blogger. I put that in bold terms there because if they're skimming, I want them to be able to kind of latch onto that skill and be like, oh, this person knows how to do copywriting and blogging. And then afterwards, I put maybe 1 or 2 sentences that explain and expand on it. You don't have to put in all the information about every single job you did. In this case, for example, for logistics coordinator, which this person here, I'm just gonna use this marker here. For logistics coordinator, where they worked at a family cafe, that was not necessarily relevant to the job that they're applying for. But we did pull out some of the qualifications that they had, for example, that might make it helpful for the communications job. So for example, independently manages online order cycle, or developed department processes and systems. Those things are all transferable skills. And so we highlight those in bold so that those stand out to us, and those are the words that stick in our head a little bit easier. And then we follow it up with 1 or 2 sentences just expanding on that. We don't have to get so in depth that they get lost in all the extra information, so try and make it as concise as possible. In fact, if you are using ChatGPT, I would recommend that you use the terms concise and plain language to try and outline your resume in terms of like the kinds of words and the kinds of tone that they use, and that can really help as well. All right, let's go back to, where was I? We were at live questions. So let's go to this question here, which is, how do we use functional resumes of the type that you just showed and still survive ATS? I heard those systems do much better with chronological resumes. You're absolutely right. And so going back to what I was mentioning before, is that it's very helpful to actually have two versions of a resume. So you're right. Maybe if you are applying and you're sending out ATS stuff, the ATS version of your resume, that should probably be in chronological order because it's going to be easier for the ATS to pick up. However, if the person is the human is reading your resume, you could also give them the skills-based resume so that they can actually absorb it in their own time like that. So I would recommend having two versions of your resume and having one that's ATS friendly and chronological. All right, let's go back. Let's see where I was. I'm going to go back to the pre-submitted questions. Let's see. Number 16. Okay, here's the next question, and I think a lot of you will probably relate to this. I absolutely cannot bring myself to apply for jobs. I know I have to update my resume, but the idea of it is overwhelming. What do I do? And, sound off in the chat if this is way too real, because I have had so many clients where, that have just been like, it's not that they don't want to apply for jobs, and it's not that they don't realize that it's important, but it's something, there's a block there. There's something in our brains that is telling us if we do this task, then it's going to bring us pain. It's going to bring us overwhelm. It's going to stress us out. And we're already at our limit. Like there's no way, right? So it's going to be really, really important to also have a mindset adjustment when it comes to this kind of work. So one of the first mindset adjustments I try to challenge my clients with is the one that I mentioned at the very, very beginning of this call, which is the fact that, resumes are only meant to get you interviews. They're not necessarily meant to get you the whole job. So the pressure that we're putting on ourselves to have the perfect resume that will get us the job is part of it. If we can kind of alleviate some of that and say, nope, it's just for us to get to catch their attention and get them interested, and we don't have to get so involved and mentally invested in it, then that's just kind of one of the things that we need to do through exposure therapy. We need to expose ourselves to this activity so that we can kind of like teach our brain and teach our nervous system that, hey, like, yeah, it kind of sucks, but it's not going to kill us. It's not going to cause us like a ton. It might cause us some distress for sure, but what can we do to try and support ourselves through that process there? Perhaps you feel understimulated. For example, let's say you're very disengaged, you're very understimulated when doing this process. And maybe it's a matter of providing yourself external stimulation. Maybe you are listening to music or something like that has a really high energy. I like to listen to lo-fi music when I'm working, so maybe that is one thing. Maybe it is the accountability aspect of it. Maybe you try and do some body doubling with, a fellow job hunter or somebody else who has some work to do or something like that, so that you have that support in the room. There are 1,000,001 ways to try and tackle this, and it really depends on, what you are specifically struggling with. And I hope that, if you have access to a coach or something, you can work through some of these challenges. But I just want to affirm that that is a really, really hard thing to deal with. And I hope that is, and I hope that's something that you'll be able to get past, because we all have to do that. It's really hard. So let's go on to the next question here, which is, I have been on burnout leave for almost a year, and now I need to start job hunting. How do I set up my resume so people won't ask me about the past year? So funny you should bring this up here. This is my answer for this is probably similar to some of the other questions I answered, which is basically let's try and use a skills-based resume to try and mask that chronological system there. Or the other thing that you can do is set it up so instead of experiences, work employment experiences, you can section title that section as highlights of experiences, so that they know that it's not your full work history, but they are hand selected so that they'll be able to consider the relevant stuff there. So yep, very similar to what I had said earlier. So hopefully that is helpful. Let's go back to some of the live questions as well. And I'm going to try and get through as many of these as I can. Let's see here. So, okay, we got one here that says, do resumes automatically go through an ATS filter? And the answer is not always, but more and more often, yes. So like basically, if you are applying for medium to large size businesses, I would say most of them probably have a system, and you'll know because it'll be something like Workday or Lever or something, like one of those systems that asks you to upload your resume, to fill out the form and all of that kind of stuff, so that they can have it automatically imported into their recruitment system, and then they can kind of like, deal with the data from in there. Now, for smaller businesses or some medium-sized businesses, depending on where you're aiming to work, those ones might just ask you to, for example, submit your resume to an email, or maybe otherwise, right? So it really depends on what system, what kind of situation you're in. Now, if it's asking you to upload a PDF or something, I would recommend putting up your designed resume. Whereas if it's asking you to upload a resume that is going to parse out all the information into the system, I would recommend that you feed in an ATS friendly resume. So that's that. So hopefully you'll be able to make an informed decision about that. Let's move on to the next question here. You're welcome, Sarah. No problem. Let's see here. So I haven't read this one yet, so we're just going to go as we go. The question is, could you please speak about how to jazz up a resume for an administrative assistant? Unfortunately, not all my previous position presented opportunities to give measurable results, and my resume feels like a long list of tasks. Okay. All right, so let me think about this for a second here. So you have a lot of experience for administrative assistant, but you have mainly been doing task-based work as opposed to work where you're going to be able to actually measure your success in numbers. And so what I'm guessing that this is coming from is that you've probably heard over and over and over again that having numbers and having statistics in your resume is a very, very effective way of showing what your contributions are, which is absolutely true. Our brains as humans respond to those numbers and statistics very well, but that is not the only way to try and help your resume. So let's see here. Without seeing your resume, like it's a little bit hard to say. And so generally what I'm thinking is, if it feels like a long list of tasks, let's try and think about, instead of the tasks that you've done, think about what is the impact of the tasks that you've done. So let's say, for example, you're an administrative assistant and you coordinated all of the sorry, my brain is frozen for a second here. You coordinated all of the documents for onboarding or something. Maybe you were helping with the HR onboarding or something. So you could, in that case, your impact would be supporting the HR team or something like that. If it was more like, you're doing front of house, like customer service or something, your impact would be that you represented the organization, that you kept the administration running smoothly or something like that. I know I'm not using the best words in this moment. I'm so sorry, but but definitely think about what the impact of what you've done is, and then organize it a lot that way. So as opposed to just listing the tasks there. You can still list the tasks, but the tasks give context to what the actual the tasks give context to what the actual accomplishment is. So there, I hope that that's helpful. Let's see here. I'm going to, okay, there's another live question here that I'm going to try and get out of the way, but we are almost at time. The day that session really blew through. So here, I always bold important skills, but recently ran across an application where I had to paste my resume and couldn't format or include links. Any ideas for how to get around that? It's uncommon, but it's still an issue. That's strange. I haven't actually come across one of those before. That being said, if it's asking you to paste your resume and it doesn't give you any formatting, then what that tells me is that it's not really looking for, like, you know, the visual aspect. It's literally just looking for the keywords. So in that situation, I would say that you want to make sure that your keywords are aligned as best as possible, and so that the system will be able to kind of pick up on those things. But yeah, it's a little strange that it would strip all the formatting and all the links and things like that. And if they and I guess the other thing that I could mention is if they provide an email, a contact email like hr@whatever.com or something, you could also take the step to email your designed resume directly to them and let them know, hey, I just applied for this job through this system here. I wanted to make sure you had a copy of my real resume. Here you go. And that's just another touch point for them to stay fresh in their mind. So I hope that that's helpful there. Let's see how many more questions I can kind of fit in here before we have to go. Let's see. The next question here is, how can I use AI tools in resume and cover letter writing in a neurodivergent friendly way? And yes, like, we all have feelings about AI and everything like that, but I definitely believe in, using the tools that you have to try and, get through this process, because it really is a survival process. Like, we're just trying to get jobs just to survive, right? So AI tools, I think some of the prompts that come to mind, I always like asking AI to write things, especially when it comes to cover letters, as let's see, as plain language and concise. Those are the two words that I typically use. I'll also use professional and friendly. So I'll be like, please write this cover letter, or please write this resume. Make sure that the voice and tone is concise, is friendly, is professional, and is plain language, because then you can kind of build up from there, instead of having a bunch of jargon that you might not necessarily use. Let's see, the other things I might recommend, there is a website that I'll pop into the chat right now. I hope that it will work. It's called Goblin Tools, and in Goblin Tools, there are a number of different tools that you can use that are really cool, but one of them is called the Formalizer. So if you took something that you wrote in your own words and you put it through this system, it will actually give you a more formal, like, work corporate type style in there. So so you can definitely try that out if that's helpful for you. Let me see if there's any other AI tips that I would give. I would definitely, it's tricky. Like, AI is not a perfect system just yet. Like, it's not so smart that it will be able to spit out a professional resume. So, like, it does take some fiddling, and, it's a little bit finicky, but hopefully those tips will be able to help you out a little bit there. Let's see if I have any additional questions here. You know what? I'm going to take this last question in the chat here, and then we're going to wrap up. So here we go. And bear with me, I'm just seeing this for the first time. I am a creative who often hasn't even heard numbers or about the impact of my work. Let's see. And even when I have, I feel like there's so many cooks in the kitchen in creative work, it can feel inauthentic to say I'm responsible for those numbers. Any thoughts about that scenario? Well, as somebody who has worked in the marketing and creative space, I totally know what you mean. There are a lot of people who contribute to it. I would say that using your words carefully. So, not necessarily saying I was responsible for this project and here are the numbers, but rather saying something like I contributed to this project and, through collaborating with my team members or through collaborating with a cross-functional team, we were able to achieve so and so these numbers and things like that. This kind of works twofold. So it doesn't like falsely represent that you did everything yourself. But it also really puts the focus on the fact that you did this through collaboration. You're also really good at working with other people. You definitely, if you worked in a cross-functional team, which is basically people who all have different skill sets, that is something that's really helpful to highlight. And I do find that a lot of job postings in this space will look for people who have worked in cross-functional teams as well. So that's kind of my initial thought on there. Hopefully that will help. Otherwise, we've kind of come to the end of our session here. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who has joined us for the session, and I hope that it was helpful. As you can see here, I am a career coach for neurodivergent professionals. You can feel free to contact me if you have any questions at all. I'm going to drop the link that explains my coaching services in the chat, and you can feel free to check that out. I'm sorry, I don't know why the hyperlink is not working, but hopefully you can copy and paste that in there. I also do have a very exciting project that is coming up that I'm calling a Buzz Academy. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create resources for neurodivergent professionals, specifically an online course that will help you figure out how to develop your neurodivergent friendly career strategy. And so I am neck deep in that work right now. I am hoping, fingers crossed, that we launch in fall 2025. If you're interested, feel free to, click on that link that I just put into the chat and check it out and get on our mailing list so that you can be the first to know about when we launch. The last thing I want to share with you is a Facebook group with almost 80,000 neurodivergent professionals from around the world, and we are an online support community. If you are on Facebook and you haven't joined us yet, I do encourage you to join in, and there's a lot of benefits that you can get from that community as well. So I've just dropped the link in there. Otherwise, that is the end of our presentation. So I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much again for coming, and I will be sending out a recording over the next week or so, along with a recap. So thank you, everybody. I hope to see you again sometime, and feel free to be in touch. Take care. I'm just turning off the recording now, so just 1 second. All right.